Act 1, Scene 2 is a huge scene. It's about 2 to 3 times longer than the average play in Hamlet, and because so many new characters are introduced, a lot of people end up just getting confused and miss out on some of the more fundamental details that are really important for the rest of the play. So, let's cover some of the key analysis points of Act 1, Scene 2. First, let's take a look at Claudius, who's achieving multiple political goals in his first speech. He's stepping up and taking over as king. He's announcing that he's married Gertrude, who was his sister-in-law, and for the original Elizabethan Christian audience at that time, this was super illegal and seen as a sin. So Claudius doesn't just say, hey, I married my sister-in-law because I want to be king or because of my personal desire. He makes it seem like he received advice from his advisors, and so it's not really 100% his decision to marry Gertrude. He's asking that everybody move on from King Hamlet's recent death under the pretense that they can't appear weak to the Norwegian army that's marching toward them. Now, that's pretty politically intense and also really clever. I mean, he firstly swooped in, took the throne from the rightful heir Hamlet. He married his sister-in-law, which in this day and age would be pretty much equivalent to admitting that he's an illegal drug dealer. And then he redirects the public's attention to Fortinbras. So immediately, we see that Shakespeare's devoted this really well-crafted, clever speech for Claudius, which helps us, the audience, establish him as a strong speaker and thinker. And again, I just want to go back and focus on how he deals with the Gertrude issue again. When he brings up this rather sensitive topic, he says, "Nor have we herein barred your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with this affair along." So he's basically suggesting that he's received advice to marry Gertrude, but here's the thing, he doesn't thank any single person or group. And since any one of these quote-unquote advisors could have given him the advice, nobody would actually be able to pinpoint where this advice came from. So this whole thing could have just been a really big lie, but Claudius makes it sound much more acceptable by saying that he had these advisors advise him to marry Gertrude. And not only that, he follows up with this much bigger important issue at hand that everybody's going to care about more, the attack on Denmark coming from Norway, namely Fortinbras. Now, the thing is, we know that Claudius had already prepared a solution to this whole Fortinbras issue, because as soon as Voltimand and Cornelius come into the scene, he's ready to give them this letter that already addresses the King of Norway what to do. So, case in point, this guy's smart, he's got his game plan under control, and at least in this scene, he's got everybody else under control too, except, as we know, Hamlet. Now, it's important to note that at this point in the scene, Hamlet's not happy about any part of this family situation he's in. To Hamlet, Claudius has broken at least 2 political rules. 1, Claudius has married his sister-in-law, which is considered incestual and illegal during this time period. And 2, Claudius has swept away the throne, even though Hamlet should have been named king. Not only this, it's clear through Hamlet's speech in lines 79 to 89 that he thinks everyone else is just disrespecting his father's memory. And your line numbers may be different in your book, but it'll be about the same. And what I'm talking about is this speech right here. "Seems, madam, nay it is, I know not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath, no, nor the fruitful river in the eye, nor the dejected haviour of the visage, together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief, that can truly denote me truly. These indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play. But I have that within, which passes show. These but the trappings and the suits of woe." Basically, it's a really harsh response back to his mother, who was just trying to tell him, hey, you can stop grieving for your father now. "Thou knowest 'tis common, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. Aye, madam, it is common. If it be, why seems it so particular with thee?" And going back to Hamlet's response, my modern day personal super basic translation would be something like this. "Nope, my grieving is for real. It's not just my inky cloak," which could be referring to his overall dark, cloudy aura, or my black clothing, since black is a color you wear to a funeral, or my heavy sighing, or my constant crying, or my grieving image overall. These behavioral cues combined with any other displays of grieving can't really represent what I'm actually feeling. Because even though they're things that a man might use to show that he's sad or hurt, I'm actually hurt inside. It's more than just showing that I'm hurt. These actions I'm showing are just symptoms of a deeper underlying sickness. Now, this is a really good point to stop and talk about why we study Shakespeare in the first place. In high school, I hated it. I didn't get it. It was created for an audience that was completely different from me. I was a 90s kid, and this play was written for people as early back as 1592. I went to school in Toronto, Canada, and this stuff was written for people in England. So on top of being written for a different audience, in a different time, in a different location, and in a different cultural setting, on top of all of that, Shakespeare's own stylized version of English, it was enough to drive me crazy, and I'm sure that's why some of you are here watching this video. But once I understood the plot and the overall storyline, I was able to actually go beyond that and take a look at how Shakespeare was using words to add complexity and expression to his work. So when you compare my super basic modern day translation to the original works of Shakespeare, you'll be able to quickly and clearly see just how much better Shakespeare's work is. And I'll give you an example right now. When I say constant crying, he says the fruitful river in the eye. And when I say I'm actually hurt inside, it's more than just showing that I'm hurt. These actions I'm showing are just symptoms of this larger sickness. He says, these but the trappings and the suits of woe. So hands down, Shakespeare's version was not only more eloquent, but also just beautiful in construction, and it still meant the same thing essentially. It just has a lot more style to it, and it's a lot more enjoyable. So if you want to improve your grades in your Shakespeare unit, firstly, you're going to have to understand the plot, the who's who, and the bigger picture. Then you're going to have to look beyond and start asking why. Why was something so important? Or why was this so significant? And then the highest level, I think, is when you start to deconstruct Shakespeare's wordplay and you start to find that he actually has more meaning than just a basic plotline there. So our summary videos basically explain the overall plot and the general storyline, bigger picture, the who's who. And our analysis videos go much more in depth into analyzing quotes and analyzing the political background and the circumstances surrounding the events that help you answer why something is so important, why something is so significant. So let's get back to the story. Basically in response to Hamlet's speech where he says, no, my pain is real, I'm not faking it, Claudius gives him this crazy verbal beating. So from about lines 90 to 121, Claudius basically says that while Hamlet's grieving is sweet and commendable, death is a natural thing, and to stay grieving for too long is unmanly and shows a heart unfortified, a mind impatient, an understanding simple and unschooled. Which is ironic because later Claudius is the one who disallows Hamlet from returning to school. So I mentioned earlier that Claudius's marriage to Gertrude was not only illegal, but it was frowned upon. And for a person in a position of power, a person of nobility, to be going through that kind of an experience, it should be extremely embarrassing and shameful, and they would normally try to hide that kind of thing. Now, the thing is, this is interesting because Claudius tells Hamlet to call him father, and then also just calls him son and cousin. So maybe Claudius doesn't think that this whole situation is embarrassing or shameful at all. Maybe he just has a different set of values, or maybe he's just not as political as I made him out to be. We never know, at least for now, because English and writing essays is about finding evidence to support your argument. So we'll have to wait and see how Claudius follows up with this stuff in order to judge whether he's one or the other. But overall, by disrespecting Hamlet, he's definitely setting himself up to be an enemy of Hamlet. This has been a pretty long analysis so far, so if you got here, congratulations. We've just got one more big point to cover, which is Hamlet's first speech or soliloquy. Now, soliloquies are a part of theater performance because Shakespeare was writing for theater, not for movies, and they're a really good way of telling us, the audience, how a character's feeling or what a character's thoughts are when they're all alone. So it's more of an honest look at a character. In Hamlet's soliloquy, we learn that he's really pissed about this whole family situation. In the first part of his soliloquy, he says that he wishes that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. So this means that basically he wishes suicide was not considered a sin because everything in the world seems terrible right now. And he also mentions that his father, the king, hasn't even been dead for 2 months yet, which tells us what kind of people Claudius and Gertrude are as well. I mean, how long do you guys think that someone should wait after a breakup before they can start dating again, right? So if they haven't even waited 2 months and they were married and the person that Gertrude married, it was the brother of her now dead husband. That's not really good, and Hamlet doesn't really like that either. Anyway, we also learned that Hamlet thinks that Claudius is basically a big piece of trash. He calls Claudius a satyr, which is a half man, half goat that lives only to drink and get drunk and fulfill his sexual desires. And in comparison, Hamlet sets his father up as Hyperion, basically a god. And if he thinks that Claudius is a satyr, then that tells us a lot about what he thinks about his mother as well, because his mother married Claudius. In fact, he gets so angry at Gertrude that he compares her to an animal that can't even reason. He says, "O God, a beast that wants discourse of reason would have mourned longer, married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules." And even more, Hamlet's misogynistic or sexist views start to seep out as well. His hate for woman overall is shown when he says, "Frailty, thy name is woman," basically saying all women are weak. And then he continues to bash his mother because ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married, O most wicked speed to post, with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. Now here's my super basic essentials only translation, and I think he's saying before she stopped crying, she married really quickly and just rushed to Claudius's bed. Now again, I want to emphasize that Shakespeare's way of saying things was way more descriptive, way more eloquent, but just because you don't understand what it means the first time you read it, don't give up. Once you understand the general concept, the general storyline, then you'll begin to be able to appreciate the details and the wordplay. So let's take a look at some of these details that I claim add so much eloquence and descriptiveness to the play. And in particular, we're going to look at this one passage where he's used words like speed and dexterity. And when you combine those descriptions with the fact that he compared Claudius to a satyr, and said that even a beast, an animal, would have mourned longer than Gertrude, you basically get this idea that Hamlet's not just completely emotional, Hamlet's capable of putting those emotions into really fancy speeches, and he doesn't just think that his mother and uncle are simply bad people, which is how I would basically translate it. He's basically saying that they're sex-crazed animals or worse. So Hamlet said some pretty offensive things in this speech, but remember, he might just be saying this stuff because he's super emotional, and he's just the type of guy who lets his mouth run when he gets upset, or maybe he actually thinks those things. On the other hand, we talked a lot in Act 1, Scene 1's analysis about how Fortinbras is Hamlet's foil, and we already know from Claudius's first big speech that Fortinbras has actually raised this army and is coming to attack Denmark, and he's even gone behind his uncle's back to do it. Think about that and compare it to Hamlet, who he's still in his black funeral clothing, and he's still just complaining about his mom and Claudius. And that brings us to the end of this huge scene. Now, if you haven't done so already, go back and take some notes. And if this video helped you at all, give us a like on YouTube, share it with your classmates, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments so we can get some discussion going. Finally, remember to subscribe because we're going to be having more of these videos coming out. Physics, calculus, chemistry, and more Shakespeare analysis videos as well. So, see you guys in Act 1, Scene 3.